The airport breathed in long, artificial sighs, the kind made of recycled air and fluorescent light, and Adrian Vale sat in the middle of it feeling like an object left behind on purpose. The bench beneath him was polished steel, too clean to be comfortable, and he crossed one leg over the other out of habit, smoothing the crease of his expensive trousers even though no one was watching closely enough to care. Around him, life moved with purpose. Families huddled over boarding passes, business travelers pacing with phones pressed to their ears, children dragging rolling bags that clicked like impatient insects across the floor. Adrian owned time in every practical sense. Yet here he was waiting, grounded by a storm that didn't care about net worth or influence. His private jet sat somewhere beyond the glass walls, silent and useless, while assistants sent updates he didn't open. He stared through the massive windows at planes taxiing in obedient lines and wondered when exactly his own life had turned into a non-stop layover. Years ago, airports had thrilled him. They meant momentum. Now they felt like mirrors, reflecting how often he was in transit and how rarely he arrived anywhere that mattered. He loosened his tie slightly, an almost rebellious act, and exhaled, noticing the tightness in his chest that no doctor had ever diagnosed because he never stayed in one place long enough for honest answers. That was when a small shadow appeared in front of him, blocking the sterile light. He didn't look up at first, assuming it was another rushing adult, until a voice, soft but steady, curious without hesitation, cut through the noise. "Are you lost too?" The question landed with surprising weight. Adrian blinked and lifted his gaze to find a little girl standing there, her sneakers scuffed, her pink backpack sagging as if it carried her whole world. She had wide, observant eyes and hair pulled into a lopsided ponytail that suggested haste rather than care. For a moment, he genuinely wondered if he'd imagined her. People didn't usually speak to him without an agenda. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice more guarded than he intended. The girl didn't flinch. She studied his face the way children do, openly, piecing together truths adults learn to hide. "You look like you don't know where you're going," she said matter-of-factly. Adrian almost smiled, almost corrected her, almost dismissed the whole thing, but something about her certainty made him pause. "I know exactly where I'm going," he replied, though the words felt thin even as he said them. She frowned, unconvinced, then pointed gently at his chest as if indicating something invisible. "Then why do you look sad?" That question cracked something open. Adrian glanced around instinctively, half expecting a parent to intervene. But the terminal flowed on, indifferent, granting them a strange pocket of privacy. No one had asked him that in years, not without ulterior motive. "What's your name?" he asked, buying time he suddenly needed. "Lena," she said brightly. "I'm waiting for my mom. She went to ask a man in a uniform something." Adrian nodded, relieved. "I'm Adrian." Lena climbed onto the bench beside him without asking, her feet swinging freely. "My grandma says airports are for people who are leaving or people who are coming back," she announced. "Which one are you?" The question lingered between them, heavier than it should have been. Adrian looked back out at the runway, at motion without destination. "I think I'm in between," he said slowly. Lena smiled as if that was the most reasonable answer in the world. Silence settled, but it wasn't awkward. It was the kind that allowed thoughts to breathe. Adrian noticed the way Lena hummed quietly to herself, the way she watched people like characters in a story unfolding just for her. He realized, with a strange ache, that he used to see the world that way too. "Do you travel a lot?" she asked suddenly. "All the time," he replied. "Is it fun?" He hesitated. "Sometimes." Lena nodded sagely. "My mom says too much of anything can make you tired. Even fun things." Adrian let out a small laugh, surprised by it. "Your mom sounds wise." "She is," Lena said proudly, then added, "but she's tired." The words sat with him. He thought of the people in his life, exhausted by proximity to his ambition or absence. Lena shifted closer, peering at his face again. "You should smile more," she said. "You look nicer when you do." Adrian complied instinctively, feeling ridiculous and oddly grateful. For the first time that day, he forgot about the storm, the jet, the deals waiting on his signature. He felt seen in a way that had nothing to do with recognition. Somewhere over the loudspeaker, a flight was called, but Adrian didn't move. He stayed exactly where he was, sitting beside a little girl who had asked the one question no one else ever had. And in that moment, the airport no longer felt like a place he was passing through, but the exact place he needed to be. Lena swung her legs back and forth, the soles of her sneakers barely missing Adrian's polished shoes, and after a moment she leaned forward, digging into her backpack with the seriousness of someone searching for treasure. She pulled out a worn coloring book, its corners bent and pages rippled, and held it up to him with both hands. "Do you want to color?" she asked, as if offering him an invitation into her world. Adrian hesitated. Somewhere in another terminal, people waited for his approval to move millions of dollars. Here, a child waited to see if he would fill in a picture of a dolphin. "I don't have a pen," he said, half expecting the moment to pass. Lena's face lit up with triumph as she produced a blue marker from the depths of her bag. "I always bring extra," she declared. He took it carefully, feeling oddly nervous, and opened the book to a page where a smiling dolphin leapt out of cartoon waves. He began to color slowly, methodically, staying inside the lines as if they were rules he'd spent his life obeying. Lena watched closely. "You're very careful," she observed. "You don't like mistakes." Adrian paused, the marker hovering. "Mistakes can be costly," he said without thinking. Lena shrugged, unbothered. "My mom says mistakes show you where not to step next time," she replied. The simplicity of it struck him harder than a lecture ever could. He continued coloring, but his movements loosened, the blue straying slightly outside the lines. Lena smiled as if she'd noticed the shift. People passed by, glancing at the unlikely pair, but Adrian felt insulated from their looks. He realized he hadn't sat still like this in years without reaching for his phone. Lena flipped to another page, then another, narrating her drawings with quiet enthusiasm. "This one is a beach," she said. "I went once. The water was loud." Adrian smiled. "Did you like it?" "Yes," she said, then added thoughtfully. "But I got lost there too." He looked at her sharply. "Lost?" She nodded, her voice softening. "Just for a little while. I couldn't see my mom, and everyone looked tall and strange." Adrian felt something twist in his chest. "What did you do?" he asked. Lena shrugged. "I cried," she admitted. "A lot." She paused, then continued. "But a man helped me. He held my hand and told me to breathe slow." Adrian listened intently, as if the story were a confession meant only for him. "Did your mom find you?" he asked. Lena smiled. "Yes, she was crying too." She glanced at Adrian, studying his face. "The man who helped me looked lonely," she added. The word echoed. "Lonely." Adrian swallowed. "Did he say anything to you?" Lena nodded. "He said grown-ups forget how to ask for help because they think they're supposed to know everything." Adrian leaned back against the bench, the marker slipping from his fingers. He thought of all the times he'd chosen silence over vulnerability, strength over honesty. "He sounds like a smart man," Adrian said quietly. Lena shook her head. "He was just kind." That distinction lingered. Kindness without strategy, without reward. The overhead speakers crackled again, announcing another delay, but Adrian barely heard it. He felt as though Lena's words were rearranging something inside him, shifting long-held assumptions. "Do you have kids?" Lena asked suddenly. Adrian laughed softly. "No, why not?" she pressed, genuinely curious. He opened his mouth, then closed it, realizing he didn't have a simple answer. "I was busy," he said finally. Lena nodded as if that explained everything and nothing at the same time. "My mom is busy too," she said, "but she still comes home." The truth in that landed quietly but firmly. Adrian looked down at the coloring book, at the uneven patches of blue he'd filled in. "Lena," he said, "do you ever feel afraid?" She considered this seriously. "Yes," she said, "but my mom says being brave doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you don't stay lost." Adrian smiled at that, a real one this time. Before he could respond, a woman's voice called out, strained with urgency. Lena. The girl looked up, eyes bright. That's my mom, she said, hopping down from the bench. A woman hurried toward them, relief washing over her face when she saw her daughter. I'm so sorry, she said to Adrian, slightly out of breath. She talks to everyone. Adrian shook his head. I'm glad she talked to me, he replied honestly. Lena hugged him suddenly, wrapping her small arms around his waist. He froze for half a second, then gently returned the embrace. Don't stay lost, she whispered into his jacket before pulling away. She waved once more, then ran back to her mother, who mouthed a silent thank you before leading her away. Adrian remained seated, the empty space beside him strangely loud. He picked up the coloring book Lena had forgotten, running his thumb over the page they'd shared. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel in a hurry to be anywhere else. The bench felt different once Lena was gone. Not colder exactly, but quieter in a way that made every thought echo. Adrian sat there longer than he intended, the forgotten coloring book resting on his knee, its bright pages an unexpected weight. Around him, the airport continued its endless rhythm. Heels clicking, suitcases rolling, announcements rising and dissolving into static. But he experienced it as if from a slight distance, as though a thin glass wall now separated him from the urgency of it all. He watched people more carefully than before, noticing the way a man rubbed his temples while staring at a departure board, the way a couple stood too far apart after an argument, the way a child pressed their face to the window with open wonder. For years, Adrian had moved through places like this with blinders on, seeing only what served his next objective. Now he felt oddly anchored, as if something small but solid had been placed inside him. His phone vibrated again in his pocket, a reminder of the world he usually lived in. He took it out and saw a flood of messages. Assistants updating schedules, partners asking for confirmation, numbers and deadlines stacked like dominoes waiting for his touch. He locked the screen without responding. The storm that had delayed his flight was clearing, but he wasn't ready to move yet. Instead, he stood and walked slowly through the terminal, not toward the private lounge, but toward the ordinary flow of travelers. He stopped at a small cafe he had passed 100 times without seeing and ordered a coffee himself. The barista smiled in surprise, not recognition, and handed him a paper cup with his name scribbled slightly wrong. Adrian didn't correct it. He sat at a small table and watched the steam rise, thinking of Lena's question and how effortlessly it had undone him. Are you lost too? He realized that, for the first time, he wasn't angry at the question. He was grateful for it. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone again, scrolling past contacts until he stopped at a name he hadn't called in years. His father. Their relationship had slowly thinned over time, stretched by distance and choices neither of them knew how to undo. Adrian remembered missed dinners, unanswered calls, the way silence had become easier than explanation. His thumb hovered over the screen as doubt crept in, but Lena's voice echoed in his mind, reminding him that grown-ups forget how to ask for help. He pressed call. The line rang once, twice, and then a familiar voice answered, cautious and older. Hello. Adrian closed his eyes. It's me, he said quietly. I think I've been lost. There was a pause, long enough for him to regret the call, and then a soft exhale came through the speaker. I wondered when you'd say that, his father replied. They talked, not about business or expectations, but about ordinary things. The weather, a neighbor, memories Adrian had buried under years of ambition. When the call ended, Adrian felt lighter, as if he had set something down that he'd been carrying for far too long. He finished his coffee and made his way toward the gate, but not before stopping at a small bookstore. He bought a coloring book identical to Lena's and tucked it into his carry-on without overthinking it. When he finally boarded his jet, the cabin felt less like an escape and more like a transition. As the plane lifted off, Adrian looked out the window at the shrinking lights below and thought about the choices waiting ahead of him. He didn't imagine a sudden transformation or a perfect ending, just small, deliberate changes. More calls returned. More dinners kept. More moments noticed instead of rushed past. Somewhere between the clouds, he made a quiet promise to himself to come home more often, to build something that didn't require him to always be elsewhere. Hours later, when the jet touched down, Adrian felt a sense of arrival he hadn't experienced in years. He took the coloring book from his bag and smiled, imagining Lena's crooked ponytail and fearless curiosity. He knew he might never see her again, but her question would stay with him, a compass he hadn't known he needed. As he stepped off the plane and into the night, Adrian realized he wasn't lost anymore. He was simply learning, at last, how to find his way.